Hey everyone, I'm Colt. Welcome to another episode of Need More Sports, where we find ourselves always needing more of the things that we love. Today we'll be sitting down with Coach Corey Kreis. Good evening, Coach. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Now, I understand that you've been coaching for nearly 10 years, in everything from wrestling to softball, with your recent rec softball team placing 4th overall in the Dixie Youth World Series. How did you initially get into coaching?
Honestly, it started when we lived in Indiana and they were in the process of starting up a rec softball league in the town that we lived in. And they had about 50 girls sign up to play, with my oldest being one of them, and they only had two coaches. So I stepped up at that point, to coach a T-ball team and have been coaching ever since.
I feel like that's a really common outcome for most of the coaches in youth sports nowadays. Now,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I feel like that is kind of a normal path. Either you love it after the first year and you stick with it, or you absolutely hate it and you never do it again.
Exactly. Now, how do you approach coaching to support athletic development for your players?
I mean, the biggest thing, it really depends on the age, on whether, if you're in T-ball, it's really, heck, almost some of these kids are just learning how to run, to be honest with you, at that age. So, as far as the athletic development, it really depends on the level of the age, sorry, the level of their athleticism already coming into, really dependent on their age, which will then curtail, how much speed and conditioning you have to do in addition to the fundamentals of the game you're coaching.
That makes sense. I myself, my daughter is genuinely learning how to run. We're working on fast feet, so I completely understand that. So, since I've got that, I've got a quote here from you. And I'll go ahead and read it off for the viewers or the folks that are just listening. Uh, Coaching is more than the numbers in the win loss column. It's about helping develop young women into future contributing members of society. Now, those are your words. So, with that being said, how does your coaching contribute to young athletes' personal development?
Yeah, so I mean, this quote specifically says young women. It absolutely applies to young men as well. This was a quote from this last season's All-Star run with the softball, and why I specified young women. Um, any sport, I think, helps teach you very valuable life lessons, especially on the mental fortitude and resiliency side of the house. Softball, I would argue, is one of the most effective at teaching those if coached correctly, because there is a lot of failure that you have to deal with in the game of softball. If you look at it from a percentages point of view, a successful batter in softball has a batting average of in between about 2 and 300. So getting a hit 2 out of 10 times up at bat. Now, if you think of that in school terms, 20%, you're failing. So you really have to
Right.
deal with failure almost on a daily basis. So really trying to help coach the girls, that mental resilience and not letting every pitch that they encounter or every play that they encounter affect their future, whether that be the next play or literally their future in life, not getting hung up on every mistake they make.
I love that. Building up their, like you said, mental fortitude, their character, just making them better people overall. So, what would be an example of a time this season when you prioritize character or teamwork over a game result?
That's a great question. I would have to think for just a second on that. So, I mean, I can think of pretty much every game that we've played, whether it would be during the rec season or I also coach a travel team. And it's really easy. And I'll use my travel team for example for this one. You have games, you have a very wide variety of skill level. Everybody kind of initially hears travel and they're like, oh, these are elite athletes. Well, not really.
Right.
They're just athletes that pay to play year round, is the only difference. So you still have some really, really good teams, and you still have some comparatively really, really bad teams that are still learning how to play the game. So it is very easy to, when playing those teams that are comparatively bad to where we are, because they're newer to the sport, to just, you know, there's time limits for our games. So you can play a game and we only have an hour and a half. And I've seen some teams, they'll bat that entire hour and a half and the other team just stands out in the field the whole time.
Of course.
That is not so, like, from my coaching point of view and the gentleman I coach with, very much under the philosophy of, like, we're not only out there to develop our girls, but we're also out there to develop all of the girls. Well, you can't develop the other girls if you just have your girls bat for an hour and a half and the other team just never gets to play the game,
Exactly.
because either like their pitcher can't throw strikes or we're just a good hitting team and they can't get the out. So there are times where you have to teach kind of the humility to the girls as well. And a way you can do that in softball is, once you're up enough, and that's a very arbitrary term, but it's
Right.
dependent on the situation. Once you're up enough, you can have your girls step off the bag early, which is illegal in softball to step off before the pitcher releases a pitch, and then they're out, as a way to assist the other team in giving their players a chance to come off the field and work on what their coaches want to work on.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. And you gave me the perfect segue for the next thing I'm about to share. So, for the folks that are listening, this is a scoreboard from the recent Dixie League World Series where Hope Mills was up 27-6 over their opponent at the end of the game. Now, obviously, you just said that we'll step off the bag. So what happened here?
Yeah, so this one was part of the Rec All Stars, playing under a different set of rules. So we played for Dixie Youth Softball, um, and their rules are, there's a couple things that differ from quote unquote normal softball. So in Dixie softball, you can only have 10 batters per inning, meaning you can only score a total of 10 runs per inning possible. You also have a strict pitching limit. They're actually the only softball sanction that has limits on their pitchers, which is for a good reason, but it's a new thing that you have to consider. And then there's no run rule per se. So, like in travel ball and even in some like school ball, there is a run rule after a certain amount of innings. In Dixie softball, you have to be what they call mathematically eliminated in order for the game to be over. So, because you can only score 10 runs per inning, in order to mathematically eliminate a team, you would have to be up by 11 after the fourth inning, because we play a 5 inning game.
Right.
So 11 after the fourth inning, or 21 after the third inning. So in this instance, the 27-6, like, yeah, that does not look like a very humble victory.
Right.
But at the same time, we have to look at it from the pitching limitations that are on my pitchers, which is 13 innings for the entire tournament. And we're looking at that tournament, it would have possibly been 7 games. So at 5 innings apiece, that's 35 innings. So you need at least 3 pitchers in order to cover 35 innings.
Okay.
Unless you can mathematically eliminate a team, earlier. Therefore, if we're up by 21 after 3 innings, my pitcher only had to pitch 3 innings that game. So now I can get another game out of her. Whereas if we went 5 innings, that's 2 extra innings that she pitched and 2 less she can pitch in the next game. So in this instance, it was kind of two things. It was we had just had our first loss to a team from Florida. So we were already in the losers bracket, and the girls, were kind of down coming off of a loss.
Right.
And this was kind of a two-pronged approach from me as the coach. It was a confidence rebuilder coming off of that loss. Their bats were hot. I didn't want to ruin, the momentum that they had. Let let them continue that momentum and hopefully carry it on into the next game. But also, we were getting short on two of our pitchers' inning counts. So if we could mathematically eliminate them after the third inning, which is what we ended up doing, uh, I was able to save our ace pitcher 2 innings so she could pitch the next day and hopefully get us into that championship game.
Okay. That makes much more sense. Seeing the score without any context just does not appear great, but with an
Yeah.
explanation like that, totally makes sense. This is Colt with Need More Sports. We have Coach Corey Kreitz with us, having a word about his coaching, as well as how some of the leagues he participates in are a wee bit different. Recently, since you've come back from your World Series tour, I noticed that quite a few girls from your rec ball team have been added to your travel team's roster. How do you view the level of competition and coaching in rec versus travel ball?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really depends on where you play, but we'll look at North Carolina and more specifically like the Fayetteville area, since that's where I coach both rec and travel ball. Um, Specifically to Fayetteville, I would say that the rec and travel ball are fairly comparable in overall competition level. Where you obviously there's exceptions to the rules. There might be one or two teams that are much better in travel ball, um, and similarly so in rec ball. Coaching wise, I would say typically your more experienced coaches are in travel ball. Um, However, there are still very good coaches in rec ball and or do both. Um, the biggest difference that I see is most of your pitchers, once they start playing travel ball, they stay in travel ball and don't necessarily play rec ball because it's just a lot of wear and tear on their arms. So that's the biggest difference that you see between the sport, between the two levels of competition, if you will, is the pitching that you will face in between rec and travel. But I will say, having gone to the World Series with this last rec team, the competition that we saw throughout the entire process from our districts to state to the actual World Series down in Louisiana far exceeded what I have seen over the last just 2.5 years that I've been coaching just softball. In the travel ball realm, what we saw in rec was actually more competitive than what we saw in travel ball.
That's really cool to hear, considering the view is normally the exact opposite of that. At least that's the way parents are perceiving it.
The view absolutely is, but the way I explained it to both my girls and parents on the rec team is the fundamental difference between rec ball and travel ball, especially if you're talking rec ball at the all-star level. The all-star tournament is truly win or go home. If you don't win, there is no more all-star team because you're done.
Right.
Whereas rec or travel ball, you go out and you have a rough tournament, like, oh well, you go back to your facility or your field and you practice and you get ready for the next tournament. So those girls are one, they're selected the best out of their rec local league and then go on to play the rest of the state and at the national level. but they truly like every game they go out there, they are playing to win because if they don't, they're done playing softball for the year.
That's those are mighty high stakes for 10-year-olds.
Yes, it is.
So, what are your thoughts on the idea that travel ball is the only path to exposure or high level experience for young athletes?
Yeah, I mean, you hear that all the time on social media, especially even from travel ball coaches, whether it's in their recruiting pitch or trying to get a girl to join their program over another program. Is they always kind of tout their experience with exposure to college scouts or private schools at the high school level to get these girls their exposure. I would argue that rec ball. So like everybody knows the Little League World Series.
Right.
Like that is rec ball. There is no other venue for 12-year-old and under, so 12U softball, to get national coverage of their play. Like the only reason Todd Frazier was known, and we'll go to baseball here for a second. Like Todd Frazier was known from his performance at the Little League World Series when he was 12 years old,
That's awesome.
prior to him ever going to college. So like if we want to talk exposure, like I would argue Little League is the best way to get exposure. Now at the local level, travel ball might be more connected into the colleges, but I
That
don't know of a travel tournament that has over, I'd have to look up the number again, but I heard during one of the softball Little League World Series games, they were averaging like I want to say 1.2 million viewers.
wow.
A travel ball doesn't get that kind of viewership.
No. No, they do not. All right. So, I've got another screenshot for you here, and this is something I want you to take a look at. This screenshot, I'll describe it for the folks that are just listening. You took your first loss playing Florida, and after the game, the teams met together on the pitching mound and prayed together before they left for the day. What kind of relationships or experiences have you seen your players gain through their journey to the World Series?
Especially in the World Series, the exposure to other states, but not only other states, but I mean, we all know different regions of the United States have a very different culture. Um, and the exposure that these girls got to other girls their age from Florida and Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina that wasn't in our age bracket, but they were there. So I mean, we had girls from 8U all the way up to 16U from 13 different states that the girls were exposed to and got to experience not only like the cultural differences, but different, I got to experience different coaching philosophies based on the regions that these teams played in. And that level of exposure for the girls just to see, like, even though I'm coaching them a certain way and teaching them certain things on the field, as far as like gameplay and discipline, and going back to that like character development that we were talking about. Just because I coach it one way doesn't mean it's the right answer. It's just an answer to the problem. Whereas you can watch all these other teams and learn things from each and every one of the teams. And that was one thing that I really credited the girls for, was like they would ask, like, why did they do a certain thing that way? And I'd be like, well, that's the way the coach, taught them to do it. And they were like, I actually like that. And we actually adapted a couple things from other teams based on the girls' feedback from being exposed to other, cultures and coaching.
We've noticed that you can get pretty intense
Mhm.
on the field. Third base coaches are known to be loud, and you fit the bill pretty well. Now, when I look at this photo, I see a coach who cares more about the kids than he does the scoreboard. And I'm going to describe the photo for the folks that are listening at home. Now, this is clearly after a loss, and you are kneeling down to be a little under eye level with your daughter, who's crying, obviously because you guys just took a tough loss. Now, we know you bring intensity to that spot. Where does this passion for coaching come from?
So this picture is from after taking our second loss at the World Series. So double elimination tournament. We're done at that point. Um, and it was a very emotional event because, one, it was over. So, there is kind of that self pride, but bigger than that was how bad, and it wasn't just me, the other coaches as well, like how bad we wanted it for the girls. And man, where that comes from, like, I honestly don't know. I guess, the old adage, like, once you have kids, specifically once you have girls, it's going to change you. And it definitely has. Like, coaching has calmed me down. And some people listening to this that know me will laugh when they hear me say that, but it truly has. Um, and it's like, I don't know, that intensity, I guess, during the games is driven by the passion for the girls and really wanting to pull the best out of them, but also letting them pull the best out of me. So like the emotional side of that was, any good coach anyways, after a loss, fourth overall at the World Series is pretty darn good looking back on it. But in the moment when you lose, it's just like, what did I do wrong to not enable these girls to go further? So it was a very emotional event just because, like, the realization of we're done. The again, this was the all-star team, so like it is no longer a team anymore. Those girls will all go their own little ways. Some of them do play on the travel team together, but it was like that team no longer exists in that moment. So it was, like a small family breaking up and everybody moving to other sides of the country and never seeing each other again. That's a little extreme. We all live in the same town, but um, it was really in the moment. It was like, man, what did I do wrong to as a coach to not enable these girls to go one more game, which would have been the championship game.
Oh man, that is a gut punch for sure. But that's all I've got for you today, and that's all I got for the viewers and listeners out there. Thanks for listening to another episode of Need More Sports. Huge thank you to Coach Kreitz for an amazing interview. Congrats again on taking fourth this year in Dixie Youth World Series. I'm sure you'll be hunting for first next year.
Definitely will be. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for stopping in. I'm Colton. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the show, pay it forward, go out there, be the reason somebody smiles today. We'll see you next time.